Today is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The last American Israeli held captive in Gaza has been released. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to this show if you haven't already. Leave a little comment or a rating on your podcast platform of choice. That's super helpful to us. We'd appreciate that. And you can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're getting through the news of the Cray here together each and every weekday, bright and early. So glad you're here with us. And joining me today, CBN's Madison Seals and Trey Goins-Phillips. A lot to get to, as always. On the focus story, Madison, a financial donation to a university helped 11 students graduate on time.
Yeah, this is such a cool story of faith in action and being willing to be part of God's plan whenever and wherever that takes you.
Love it. Get the details on that in just a minute. On the main thing, the Thorn, the theatrical experience that brings Jesus in a unique way to people all over America. CBN's Billy Hallowell has more on that on the main thing. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including our latest from CBN's Abigail Robertson, Heaven Meets Earth. Make sure you subscribe to that. You can find the link in the description to this podcast episode. And with that, we are going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. An Israeli soldier, Edan Alexander, is the last living American hostage held by Hamas, has been released. President Trump praised the gesture as a possible step toward ending the war. Israel's government says no ceasefire or prisoner exchange was agreed to, only a narrow corridor for Alexander's release under fire as fighting continues in Gaza. Israel's now shifting strategy. Instead of quick strikes, the IDF is seizing and holding territory to corner Hamas. Meanwhile, U.S.-Iran nuclear talks are making progress, but Tehran insists its uranium enrichment is quote-unquote non-negotiable. The IDF also issued a warning to civilians near Yemen's ports due to Houthi terrorist use. And in St. Louis, 13-year-old DJ Daniel, the young man battling terminal brain cancer who went viral after the State of the Union address a couple months ago, was sworn in by over 200 law enforcement agencies at once, setting a world record. DJ's goal is to be sworn into 1,000 departments nationwide. He's already captured hearts across America, and of course, including Trump and Elon Musk, who gifted him a Cybertruck for his travels. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Tara Mergener has a great story on DJ Daniel. She's interviewed him a couple times. That's a really heartwarming one there, and a sea of negativity that we see all across the news. But a lot going on, guys. And, you know, listen, on the release of the last last American from Gaza, it's honestly, guys, it just blows me away every time we go about life and we move on and you forget there are still hostages there. I mean, what an insane thing that's happening right now.
It's a conundrum, I think, that we're living in right now, that we have more awareness ever than we've had before about things going on around the world, but there's been less coverage, it seems, of this than really anything else happening, which is crazy that they're still, actively, as you said, there are actively hostages and, held by Hamas in Gaza. They are, so the fact that that's still happening is heartbreaking, but it's also encouraging when we see stories like this, right? And also encouraging to see the action that has happened since President Trump, assumed office for his second term.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is encouraging to see somebody finally be released. I'm sure their family, whatever the scene looks like when they're finally being reunited after all this time is incredible and such an answer to prayer. And yet the prayers don't stop with the reunion. There's a lot of mental healing that Eden's going to have to go through, a lot that his family's going to have to go through, physical healing as well. I know he's going to be transferred to a hospital for examination. So the prayers really kind of continue from here and even advance for just how you go about life after going through something like this. And, I know for Israel still in the middle of this, it seems like there's kind of a discrepancy between how Israel's government is responding to this versus how President Trump is. President Trump's holding a more excited and kind of relieved stance, or maybe a more positive stance. And Israel's government seems to be saying that there wasn't really a super peaceful release of this prisoner, and they're still in the midst of this war. So we just need to, yeah, like you said, keep not only keep up on the news, but keep praying and keep this at the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, at CBN News, we will be all over all the latest developments on that between CBN's Chris Mitchell in Israel and his team there, Raj Nair and more, covering Israel extensively. So stay tuned for that. All right, we're going to head to the focus story now. As we mentioned there, a church in Virginia reached across its border to help students in another state graduate. So tell me how this all came together.
Yeah, well, just after reading the press release for this story, you can see God's hand all over it. So, a predominantly African-American megachurch called Alfred Street Baptist Church of Alexandria, Virginia, donated about $132,000 to St. Augustine's University in North Carolina. And that donation took care of the debts of 11 graduating college seniors and allowed them to actually graduate with their class. So initially, the university told the graduating class of about 25 students that students with unpaid tuition balances could not participate in the commencement ceremony. So 11 of the students with debts decided to ask for help and wrote heartfelt letters detailing their financial struggles and expressing gratitude for any assistance. And those letters were mailed out and shared by SAU alumni and church members in the Washington, D.C. area. And Alfred Street Baptist Church decided to act on it. So the congregation notified the school that they would cover the outstanding balances for the remaining 11 seniors before the commencement ceremony so that the students could graduate completely debt-free. And not only did the church donate money, though, but representatives from the church actually attended the graduation ceremony in North Carolina to congratulate the students, cheer them on. And the students who received financial aid got the opportunity to share their letters of need and thanks during the ceremony. So it's a really cool story of faith and love in action.
Yeah, really cool indeed. So how did the university respond?
This is not only an obvious blessing to the students who were able to graduate because of the financial gifts, but it's also a blessing to the school. The school has been struggling for the last several years to maintain its accreditation because of its own financial burdens that has forced the administration to cut staff and many of its in-person classes. And they've been very open about this because they've asked for help. And the donation came at a time when the school could use some help and encouragement too. So their interim president, Marcus Burgess, said in a press release that the act of grace by Alfred Street Baptist Church is nothing short of transformative for the students and their institution. And he went on to say that they're immensely grateful for this demonstration of faith and partnership. And this donation is a shining example of how faith and collaboration can empower students to step confidently into their futures. And then he also said that it renews their hope and underscores a bright future for SAU as well.
So what was the church's reason behind doing this donation? What'd they say?
Well, there's a clear command in Scripture to give freely because our money is not our own, it's the Lord's. And the church in general has such a great opportunity to do this through tithing. And we do see it happen a lot through tithing, but it is easy to only look for needs in our own community. And I think that's what's so cool about this story is that this church in Virginia saw a need in another state and decided to be a blessing and meet it. And the senior pastor said, this is what ministry looks like. We believe in investing in students. He said they believe in investing in HBCUs and in a future where financial hardship should never be a barrier to graduation. So the giving itself brought God glory. And I love that those students who were helped were also able to give God glory by sharing their letters that they wrote asking for help, since that's their expression of faith that God would provide. And I think this is just an example of how God uses his people to bring him glory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's so many times, if you think about not just because it's our command to help others, but even on a practical front, like maybe even slightly a selfish front, it's like anytime you give to someone, we've all bought stuff that we've wanted, right? And that's fun, right? You buy something, it's exciting, it's new, whatever. But it doesn't compare to when you donate and help someone else who's in need. in a situation, not even, I mean, beyond like a little donation, right? When you actually go, okay, we really got to plan this one out and we think this is worth doing and we do it, it's so much more rewarding. It's almost like God designed it and it's going to bring you joy. And yet we still don't convince ourselves of this just based on our typical, at least, me speaking. I'm not criticizing other people and just saying, the natural habit is to spend on ourselves and the things we're going to do. And it's always way more fulfilling to donate to others. And so this church doing that to help others in a pinch is good on that front. But my second thought was that we should be supporting universities like this, especially Christian universities, because they have an uphill battle. It's just, you're already going for a smaller number of students who are that dedicated that they want to go to a Christian university. And so it's an uphill battle and trying to make it affordable to people. And so any help that they can get is a blessing to them to help their students. This is just a win-win all around. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's an encouraging story for sure. And to your first point, Dan, I think that's why Scripture says to treat others the way that we want to be treated, or to love each other or love others the way that we love ourselves, right? Because God knows that we don't have any trouble loving and caring about ourselves. It's when we start to prioritize other people. So, and that's when the reward comes. It's also fascinating, even if you think about and dig into some of the science behind giving. Like, we have these, dopamine releases that happen when we give to other people. It's like God literally he innately built into our systems rewards for when we give to other people. And then, of course, the most important is the spiritual principle of giving to other people, because that's what God calls us to do, to live sacrificially. So yeah, stories like this are really encouraging and great to hear, especially around graduation season. I know a lot of people just graduated or are about to graduate, or maybe even are starting college in the fall. So good story for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Madison, any final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, like you're saying, giving is also designed by God to be a gift to us too. And I think sometimes there's so many people willing to give and they don't know what to do with that. And I just think of my church not too long ago decided to just extend an offer. Anybody who wants to give a gift, put your name and your contact info on a card. Anybody who has a need, put your name and contact info on a card. And once they counted all those up, the people willing to give far exceeded the ones who needed some sort of help or financial aid or something like that. And it was just so cool to see that. And they were able to match all of those needs with someone who was able to help. And I just wonder how many opportunities there are like that in churches that aren't even known about, how many people are willing to give and just don't know where to apply it. So I think it's a good reminder.
Yeah, it really is. And also too, another thing that's difficult, I think, sometimes for us is admitting we need a need and burying your pride and humbling yourself and actually allowing yourself to be blessed by someone else. That's a hard thing to do for a lot of people, and myself included. And so to humble yourself, to admit that you need a need, that just doing that is hard enough. And so hopefully more people willing to do that, because you never know how God's going to use that time in your life where you are the one in need. There's going to be some time later on where you're the one blessing someone else, and you'll remember exactly how it felt when you were in that situation. But so sometimes it just takes that act of humility in order to kind of keep that going and let God do his work. So good story there. Appreciate you bringing it to podcast today. All right, that's going to lead us to the main thing now. And the Thorn is a fascinating theatrical experience that brings Jesus in a definitely different way, unique way, to people all over America. The creator, John Bolin, joined Billy for today's main thing to explain what he believes God's doing through this unique and powerful show. That's today's main thing.
For those who don't know, what is the Thorn? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, good morning, Billy. The Thorn is a 2.5 hour. It's been described as the Passion of the Christ meets sort of a Cirque du Soleil type show. It's not a musical. It's not a play. It's more of an experience. It features about 50 or so live performers on stage. We're talking about actors, singers, dancers, aerial acrobats, martial artists that all come together to use all of these different forms of the arts to tell the gospel story, beginning in the book of Genesis and ending with the book of Acts.
And so this is something, I mean, you've traveled to over 70 cities with this show, and it's pretty incredible. It goes back a couple of decades now. You've been doing this for a long time. You're the creator of it. What was it that sparked in you this quest to create the Thorn?
You know, I didn't certainly intend for it to be this. We had no idea this was coming. Almost 30 years ago, about 25 years ago, I was working as a volunteer youth pastor at a church in Colorado Springs. And I wasn't, or a brand new youth pastor, I wasn't a great preacher. And so we would do a lot of these, back then we called them illustrated sermons, or, you know, that kind of a thing, instead of preaching. And so the week before the very first Thorn performance, I was sitting on the edge of the stage after a youth meeting, and a 16-year-old girl came and sat next to me, and she held out her arms, and I could see where she'd been cutting up and down her arms, and she just began to weep. And I looked at her and I said, you don't have to do that, because I believe Jesus did that for you 2,000 years ago. So that night, Billy, I decided that the next Wednesday night, we would do a drama that would show two things. One, the price that Jesus paid without pulling any punches. These are high school and college students. Didn't want to be gratuitous, but I wanted them to know viscerally, no matter what you're going through, no matter how dark the season is for you, Jesus understands because he's been here. And number two, I wanted to show the reality of what I call the spiritual battle for the identity, the calling, and the destiny of a young generation. So the next Wednesday night, we did the very first Thorn performance, and it wasn't great. The music wasn't great. The makeup wasn't great. The lighting was non-existent. We had 4 people in the corner of the room turning up and down lamps, but something happened there. I think the Holy Spirit was there, and a couple hundred high school students had an encounter with God. And the next Easter season, the church asked us to perform the Thorn as the church's Easter production, and that began the process of what is now a touring production, an independent production company. And over just in the last 2 years, we switched the model from touring to big churches to now touring exclusively to performing arts centers and arenas, and that's made all the difference. So now the Thorn reaches across the spectrum, from Protestants to Catholics, from Baptists to charismatics to agnostics to seekers. And what we're seeing is nothing short of a miracle, as night after night, these beautiful performing arts centers are jam-packed with people that are hungry for the gospel.
How many shows are you guys doing a year at this point?
This year, we'll do almost 100 shows, and most of these rooms seat about between 2,000 and 3,000 people. And I'm telling you, it's a miracle watching what's happening. The industry can't believe it. These performing arts centers, usually when we call to book the show, they're like, well, maybe we can do one show, and that's just if you're desperate. But we end up oftentimes adding a second, third, fourth show in a lot of these markets, and the venues are blown away. The audiences leave awestruck, and we believe God's doing something pretty miraculous.
This is amazing. Now, why do you think this is something, in light of where we are culturally right now, that is so needed? You were doing this, and it's so interesting to me that a girl cutting herself coming up to you was the impetus for this, and you just never know what it's going to be that sparks the idea, and that God sparks within us, right? And that was the interaction. But why do you think, in light of that conversation and where we are culturally right now, this is so needed?
You know, first of all, I'll tell you, there's nothing that's dramatically special about the Thorn. It's that God has, I believe he's doing something around the world right now. And we need to be obedient, and we do as high quality of a performance as we can. We think the story of God deserves to be told with excellence, so that matters. But I think he's doing something much bigger than us. You see it happening with The Chosen right now, and people that are hungry for the gospel. You see it many other
House of David, right?
House of David, Jesus Revolution. There's just something happening in culture where I think people are leaning into hope. And of course, there's no greater hope than the gospel. And so as things are happening around the world, politically, economically, I mean, right now, even in the last 2 days, you see what's happening with the economy. I know people are they're nervous, they're afraid, they're looking for hope. And I think things like this bring them hope. I've heard that among younger people, the attendance in churches is down a bit, but the purchase of Bibles is going through the roof. So people are hungry for truth and for hope. And again, there's no better place than the gospel to find hope.
Absolutely. I love that. There's no better place than the gospel to find hope. So where can people go if they want to get tickets, find out if the Thorn is coming to their town, find out more information? Where do they go for that?
the best place to go is thethorn.com, and we have our current tour schedule there. We post the upcoming tour schedules. We're touring twice a year during the spring and fall, so we're on the road 5 months a year with our team, and it's showing no signs of slowing. So if you missed it in your city, then just know we'll be back. So we tour East Coast, West Coast, every part of the country. We're actually going to dip our toe into Canada this fall. So that'll be interesting, especially right now. But we'll be in Canada in the fall, and who knows where we go after that. God is opening doors continually. So if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out. It's also available on DVD and video. It'll even be playing for free on the Up TV Faith and Family Network during the Easter week. So lots of ways to experience the Thorn, both on video, but there's nothing like the live experience.
I so appreciate you taking the time and joining me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all you're doing, and appreciate it. Look forward to chatting again sometime.
All right, Billy, appreciate that conversation there. And it is true. There are a lot of really good faith-based shows that are out there, and you're seeing the production quality get increased almost exponentially at times on different broadcasts, different productions, different films. So very, very cool to see. It's an exciting time to be not just a filmmaker, but a Christian filmmaker. I mean, the technology is there, and it's making it easier for everyone. So very, very cool story there. Appreciate that. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today. For one last thing, we're going to take a look at Matthew 5:13, which reads, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet." And that's just a reminder, talking about that giving story that you were doing earlier, Madison, just kind of made me think of this verse and the fact that, we've got to be the salt. We've got to be doing these things instead of just kind of in our own little cocoons.
I was talking to Al Mohler recently about this verse, actually, and he said, I think we have the clip up on our social media or on CBN News YouTube channel. He was talking about that verse is actually, we're not called to be the salt in the earth. When we become Christians, we are the salt of the earth, just by default of being believers. And I thought that was a great distinction and a good reminder.
Yeah, I love when Jesus uses analogies to communicate important concepts like this, because it shows the significance of what happens when we do act on his commands and what happens when we don't. And he clearly does not like lukewarm. We're called to live out our faith with action.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thought to leave it on this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, just make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com. You get more news from a Christian perspective there. Just not going to get that really anywhere else right now. So make sure you're checking that out. As always, Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.